Hello everyone. I'm very honored and excited to be speaking at this extraordinary event. I'm grateful to be presenting alongside so many inspiring, knowledgeable, and talented creators here today, and humbled to be invited to speak alongside them. Big thanks to Will Keller and Chris Jansen for putting all this together. You guys have done an amazing job. And thank you to everyone who is gathered here today in the name of seeking knowledge, wisdom, and freedom. This is actually only my second formal presentation ever, and by far the largest. So large, in fact, that this will be a very shortened version of the full presentation. If you're watching this and just curious about the topic, this will be a great introduction for you. Or if you want to share with a friend and you know that they won't watch a long presentation, then just send them this one. However, if you want to fully explore this topic deeply, I highly recommend you check out the extended version that is posted on my channel as of now. So I'm very excited to share this with all of you today. Let's go ahead and begin. My name is Logan Hart. I am a spiritual student and teacher, a presenter, podcaster, musician, producer, artist, voice actor, and entrepreneur from Central Texas area. I'm the creator of The Wizard Factory, a spiritual philosophy platform featuring a video podcast and weekly live show. So this presentation is called Trivium Hacking, Mind Control and How It Perpetuates the Slave System. Mind control is the one overarching mechanism that perpetuates the slave system, the greatest threat to freedom and humanity itself. So how do you know if you're under mind control, let alone get out of it? You have to understand what it is and how it works. Have you ever asked yourself, how did we get here? How did things get this bad? What is wrong with people nowadays? Why are more and more people becoming so angry, bitter, hostile, depressed, and deranged, even suicidal? How could such horrors of Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia have happened? The Taliban, ISIS, Heaven's Gate, Jonestown, North Korea. The list seems endless. Torture, slavery, propaganda, tyranny, and genocide. How can ordinary people allow and even participate in such evils? Many people seem to at least have the basic understanding that something is terribly awry in our world, yet so very few actually have a good grasp on what is happening or understand the root cause. It is my intention with this presentation to shed some light on the psychological causal factors for the insanity of human behavior. Not only could this information empower you to start or continue the work on taking your own mind back, but hopefully at least offer you some level of comfort and understanding for why humans act the way they do, and explain the madness becoming increasingly prevalent in our world every day. Human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. So this is a quick overview of this presentation. We'll be covering what is mind control, how does mind control work, and how to free yourself from mind control. The greatest weapon of any oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The human mind is the most delicate of all instruments. It is so finely adjusted, so susceptible to the impact of outside influences that is providing a malleable tool in the hands of sinister men. CIA Director Alan Dulles. So what is mind control? Mind control is the science and practice of influencing an individual, group, or an entire population by manipulating their thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, which all contribute to their capacity to act or not act within certain parameters of behavior in accordance with a particular agenda. It is perpetrated primarily using methods of persuasion, deception, manipulation, or coercion in order to induce conformity, compliance, or obedience. These methods and tactics are effective individually, but can be combined into exponentially more potent system of control known as trauma-based mind control, also known as psychological warfare, brainwashing, and coercive persuasion. The most insidious and effective form of mind control is that which is completely undetectable, wherein the victim believes the ideas, desires, fears, and behaviors implanted in their minds are their own. They are exercising their own free will, which in a way is technically true, yet highly manipulated. Put another way, mind control is not the removal of free will, but the usurping of it. Mind control can be employed at both an individual level as well as a collective level. Practically all of the fundamental mechanics and techniques of mind control apply in parallel across both the micro and macro levels. Once you've learned how it operates and being observant and vigilant, you can easily recognize this type of manipulation in your own interpersonal relationships as well as in communal, societal, and systemic institutions and cultural traditions. The mass mind control agenda is being carried out on a global scale by individuals who could be described as dark occultists. A dark occultist is one who utilizes the obscuration and monopolized leverage of the secret universal knowledge of cosmic law and esoteric psychology to maintain a power differential over the uninitiated masses at large. These social engineers hold high positions of power across key institutions of systemic infrastructure, including government, religion, banking, healthcare, media, education, and other fundamental organizations who can utilize these apparatuses in unison to perpetuate this mass mind control. They see themselves as gods, the rightful masters of humanity who can shape and manipulate the population of Earth as they see fit, as pawns to be used and abused to carry out their selfish will. These individuals understand that if you control a person's mind, you subsequently control their actions and therefore their creative power, which can then be co-opted to serve your own goals. This is why mind control is such a vital topic and why these dark occultists place their primary focus on expending vast energy and resources towards this practice. Control the mind and you control the world. The primary purpose of mind control at the highest level, as it is discussed in this presentation, is to keep the current control matrix in effect. The control matrix is the false reality that has been grafted upon the natural world in order to shroud and obfuscate the true reality of this world and our own infinite power and value. The ultimate goal of this system is the advancement of the New World Order agenda to keep the masses locked in a state of perpetual slavery, with these dark elites acting as gods and rulers in total dominion over mankind. The system is fundamentally anti-human, and its sole function is the destruction of freedom and all that is good. And how is this accomplished? By making the people falsely believe that they are free, when in reality they are slaves. This is utilizing or exploiting the illusion of choice and offering limited or false dialectics, making them believe that freedom doesn't exist or that they do not deserve it, or by limiting their consent and the freedoms available to them through violence and coercion. The disempowerment of humanity is manifest by way of ignorance of self, their existential condition of slavery, and natural law, juxtaposed by the deeply intimate understanding of these dynamics possessed by the ruling class. The title I chose for this presentation is Mind Control and How It Perpetuates the Slave System. The term perpetuates is a verb that means to cause or prolong the continuation of something, often a negative or undesirable situation or behavior. It refers to the act of maintaining, sustaining, or keeping something in existence or in a particular state over a prolonged period of time. When something perpetuates, It typically continues or remains unchanged, often reinforcing or prolonging an existing condition, pattern, or belief. Mind control is the self-reinforcing mechanism which perpetuates the system of slavery and keeps it in place. If spirituality is defined as the expansion of consciousness, and mind control is the suppression of consciousness, then mind control is de facto spiritual warfare. All right, let's talk about trauma. So, trauma is defined as an event or action resulting in severe psychological, emotional, or physical harm, or a disordered psychic or behavioral state resulting from severe mental or emotional stress or physical injury. So it is both the thing that causes the harm and the state caused by the harm. Trauma is the Greek word for wound. So it is a psychological, emotional, or physical wound. Put another way, trauma can be defined as an experience or event that gives acute or cumulative distress to the nervous system and psyche. Trauma can manifest from an isolated event or a chronic experience, compounded over time. Trauma can be seen as a form of energetic or physical rape, an unwanted and harmful penetration of your boundaries, of your personhood, a violation of your sovereignty and autonomy. This disrupts, fractures, and distorts your sense of self, and your ego will have a threefold reaction to it: a fracturing, disruption, and confusion of your identity, a compensation of either an overinflation or a diminishment of your perceived boundaries, your sense of self, and your self-worth, so one or the other, and a distorted or negative perception of reality. Violence and coercion are forms of sovereignty violation. When you are violated against your will, this is a traumatic experience and creates lasting psychological effects known as post-traumatic stress disorder and psychosis. Their severity will be relative to the degree of severity of the trauma. Complex PTSD is caused by sustained trauma compounded over time. So, trauma creates states of imbalance and pushes a mind to be dominant to one side or the other. We spoke earlier about what are the results of left or right brain imbalance. So this creates either master or slave mentality. A traumatic experience will also disrupt a person's sense of control, as the violation was a negation and domination of their control and consent. So they will also seek to overcompensate by either adopting a master or slave mentality. Meaning, they will either become overly controlling of others and their external environment, which is an obsession of control, or overly passive in what they will allow, even if harmful, a total relinquishment of control. It's a projection of the powerlessness that was imposed upon them through that trauma. Trauma also distorts your identity or your sense of self and leaves you primed to form a false identity by bonding with toxic beliefs, constructs, behaviors, and so forth to fill the void left by your psychological wounding. The entire system operates on violating your sovereignty, penetrating your boundaries. This is where all systemic trauma comes from. Now, origins of trauma and abuse can be placed into two different categories, what I call vertical and horizontal trauma. Vertical trauma, or top-down trauma, is trauma which comes from the control system itself, the institutions and societal structures. This trauma tends to be rooted in authority or coercive hierarchy, hence top-down. Horizontal trauma is lateral trauma, which happens between individuals at the parallel level. This trauma is generally incited through interrelational abuse, petty crime, and collectively through culture. Culture often uses covert coercion via shame, guilt, ostracization, ridicule, virtue signaling, and appeal to authority. Top-down trauma is disseminated down and propagates at each level horizontally, then carried further along down the pyramid, and often leaks back upwards as well. This dynamic creates a perpetual feedback loop of trauma and abuse, which propagates and reinforces itself multilaterally, up and down, side to side. Trauma bonding, also referred to as Stockholm Syndrome, is a psychological phenomenon in which a victim develops a bond with their abuser. This can manifest as feelings of emotional attachment, positive sentiment, affection, and/or loyalty towards them. This can occur in any type of abusive relationship, whether it is physical, emotional, or psychological abuse. The term Stockholm Syndrome originated during the 1970s when several of the hostages of the Norrmalmstorg bank robbery that occurred in Stockholm, Sweden, developed positive feelings towards the robbers. Over time, this trauma can create a bond between victim and the abuser, as the victim begins to rely on the abuser for validation, approval, and even their sense of self-worth. The victim may also feel guilt or shame about the abuse, or fear that they will not be able to cope without the abuser. In some cases, the victim may even defend the abuser or blame themselves for the abuse. Another important aspect of Stockholm Syndrome is that not only do the victims develop a positive bond with their captors, but negative feelings towards those trying to save them, i.e. law enforcement in hostage situations or friends encouraging a battered wife to leave her husband. So what does this tell you about the typical attitude and response you get from those who are hopelessly enslaved and dependent on the system when you try to explain the nature of their captivity, the corruption, and are met with malice and contempt, all while praising the psychopaths in power? This phenomenon is a survival response and coping mechanism that compels the victim to identify with the abuser and minimize the threat they pose. The most likely reasons are fear. The victim may be afraid of the consequences of non-compliance or attempting to escape. They're being held without their consent, and the mind can convince itself that it's what they actually wanted anyway. The victim may also try to find ways to please the abuser or minimize the abuse in order to reduce their own suffering, as well as helplessness. The victim feels powerless to the dominance of their abusers, therefore they find security and comfort in developing a relationship with them. Trauma bonding is nearly always used to describe the bond between victim and abuser, but I have expanded the concept to include that it can also develop towards an idea, belief, institution, or any other construct of one's own identity. Another way to frame this is that a traumatized person will identify and bond with anything or anyone that can fill in the holes of their gaping psychological wounds and damaged sense of self. It acts as a proxy for their true identity and healthy, authentic connection with themselves and others, and activities and behaviors. People cling to their beliefs and embrace dogmatic thinking because they've bonded and identified with their poisoned worldviews, toxic habits and cultures, as well as their abusers and those who otherwise keep the system going. They form a codependent relationship with these constructs, trying desperately to use them as a proxy for their own fractured identity. Much like an addiction, it is an attempt to use these constructs to give them a sense of wholeness they lack due to their trauma. Breaking a trauma bond can be extremely difficult, since the victim may be afraid of their ability to cope without the relationship. They may even have trouble recognizing the abusive nature of their relationship or making the decision to leave the abusive situation. It is worth noting that trauma bonding works both ways. The abuser can be just as codependent with their victims, give them a sense of wholeness to maintain control over someone else. Because they have such a lack of internal power and self-control, they're outsourcing that power deficit. And remember, again, that behavior is highly based upon one's identity. If you can artificially implant an identity within a mind, they will act accordingly and believe that it is actually who they are. We can choose to use our growing knowledge to enslave people in ways never dreamed of before, depersonalizing them, controlling them by means so carefully selected that they will perhaps never be aware of their loss of personhood. Now, addiction is a big one. Addictions are behaviors which satisfy some sort of compulsive need and are nearly always toxic and self-destructive, and their satiative effects are very temporary and must be habitually repeated, never actually healing the underlying cause driving the behavior. Addicts have trauma bonded with their vices. So through these behaviors, they are seeking an escape from their internal and external reality, and a temporary sense of connection, control, and completeness gives them the sense, which is like false healing, all the things the trauma took away from them. And these false identity constructs, as we just looked at, are their own form of addictions, which achieve the same effects. Psychologically, it's basically the same thing. You're just addicted to the gym or video games or a certain TV show or being this or being that, rather than your typical thought of an addiction. Addiction is at an all-time high, widespread, and most of them, in the totality of them, are normalized. So people with addictions, which is basically everyone, become extremely predictable, and they have a strong motivator which can be easily exploited. These trauma-bonded identity constructs often can be easily recognized by their rigid, religious-like dogmatic belief and attachment. People will cling to these beliefs and identities even when presented with conflicting evidence or rationale. The more identified a person is to their belief, the more desperately they will remain entrenched in it, ignoring or even attacking anything that threatens them. Dogma is a symptom of cognitive dissonance, a psychological phenomena that occurs when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs simultaneously. When these discrepancies are exposed, the person becomes highly uncomfortable, flustered, erratic, and sometimes outright hostile. This is because they are deeply identified with that belief, identified with it. So by attacking their beliefs, they are literally incapable of distinguishing it from a personal attack on them. This may also elicit a strong feeling of insecurity as that person's identity is being challenged. You're pressing up against that trauma-bonded belief. The cracks and falsities are being exposed, and this can result in very erratic or explosive behavior and emotional outburst. This behavior is indistinguishable from that of an addict when something or someone speaks against or interferes with their habits or vices, because psychologically, this trauma bond works exactly the same way. So, some examples of cognitive dissonance might be, all politicians are scumbags, but the police and military who enforce their policies are heroes and deserve the highest respect, and they protect our freedoms, etc. Or people can't be trusted with freedom, but they can be trusted with executive governmental authority and power. What about it's wrong to lie, steal, assault, trespass, and murder unless you're the government? Humans are responsible for the fall of man via Christianity. Our sins have earned our damnation, but no amount of good works can earn you salvation. And finally, karma is real, but morality and truth are subjective. These are all contradictory beliefs. And when you point these things out, person's going to get potentially very uncomfortable and hostile with you. In fact, I may have just triggered someone by saying those out loud. So now that we've sufficiently defined what is mind control, let's get into the mechanics of how it actually works. The foundational technique used to manipulate and control the masses is a process called trauma-based mind control. Trauma-based mind control involves the use of extreme trauma, such as physical or sexual abuse, to create a split or fracture in a person's personality. This fracture creates a blank slate that can be programmed with new beliefs, behaviors, and thought patterns. The trauma is often repeated over a long period of time and is designed to create a sense of helplessness and dependency on the victim. Once the victim's personality has been fractured, the mind controllers can then begin to program the person with new beliefs and behaviors. The goal of the programming is to create a new identity for the victim that is completely loyal to the mind controllers and is willing to do their bidding without question. This can also result in the formation of distinct, separate identities or alters, each with their own thoughts, feelings, memories, and behaviors. The effects of trauma-based mind control on its victims can be complex and long-lasting. Here are some potential effects of the psychology of its victims. Dissociation. As we talked about earlier, victims of trauma-based mind control may experience dissociation, which is a psychological coping mechanism that involves disconnecting from one's thoughts, feelings, and memories. This can result in a sense of detachment or numbness and can make it difficult for the individual to connect with others or form meaningful relationships. Identity issues. Trauma-based mind control can also cause identity issues as the individual may have difficulties separating their own thoughts and beliefs from those imposed upon them through the trauma. This can result in confusion or a sense of lost identity, and PTSD, depression, and anxiety. For mind control to be effective, the perpetrators must achieve one or both of two objectives. Free will hacking. Surreptitiously hijack your free will so that you unwittingly make the choices they want you to, or demoralization, erode and diminish your self-worth so severely that you become a willing slave. They would prefer the second option, but if that fails, they will take the first one or some combination of the two. There are two mental constructs that compel human behavior: identity and worldview. Again, internal and external correspondence. This means your conceptual ideas about yourself and your axioms held about the conditions, rules, and probable outcomes of reality. Your free will choices will be nearly entirely based on these two concepts. If both aspects can be hacked and manipulated, one can completely control the behavior of a human being externally. Trauma, especially compounded trauma, experienced over time, erodes and breaks down the identity of an individual and demoralizes them. This is the state where a person is most susceptible to mind control. Their mind is broken down and ready to have malware installed. Trauma and coercion till the soil of the garden of your mind, priming it for the planting of the seeds of programming and mind control. The functions of mind control are to diminish your self-worth and compel you to capitulate and abdicate your power and authority, and trauma bond to false identities which result in predictable and easily manipulated behaviors. We act and behave in alignment with who we think we are, who we are identified as. Mind control plays into our poisoned worldview created by trauma and propaganda. By exploiting this external view, we then accept toxic beliefs about ourselves, which forms a false identity by which we operate in the world. Let's use Christianity as an example. First, we're told to accept that the world is run by Satan. We must accept the concept of original sin and the idea that we are sinners. Satan has power over us, right? We have no power. Satan has power over us. That's why we're sinners. Once this belief is accepted, we will then be willing to give our power and sovereignty to an external entity, in this case Jesus, and beg for salvation. Well, I'd much rather let Jesus and Yahweh have power over me than Satan. The belief in government also has its own version of original sin. First, we must accept the belief that humans, ourselves included, are inherently evil and dangerous and cannot be trusted with freedom. Once we accept this belief, we'll accept and condone our own enslavement and subjugation in the name of law and order. The system exploits your poisoned world and self-view. It relies on you projecting your internal pain outwardly into the world. This is what makes people cheer when cops kill an unarmed person simply for not complying, hating other races or genders, starting a war in a foreign land, or voting on insane laws. It exploits your fear of others, personal responsibilities, objective truth, and the fear of freedom itself. It projects that internal self-hatred outwards towards others or inwardly toward yourself. They want people to adopt the mindset of accepting and condoning violence because it perpetuates the multilateral cycle of abuse to continue, which enables the susceptibility and viability to mind control. The more trauma, the more drama. The more drama, the more trauma. The system legitimizes and justifies itself through chaos. Without it, it would have no purpose. So perpetrating crime and disorder is literally essential to its survival. Free will is your inalienable right to make choices as a spiritual being, occupying a physical body. It is the essential component to your autonomy, self-ownership, and rulership. It is the random component of the universe. It is inescapable and ultimately cannot be overridden. To maintain dominion over the population, they must stifle or hijack it. That's why they use trauma, because it keeps people locked in their predictable, programmed response, rather than exercising their heart-based, holistic intelligence that leads to higher consciousness, free will expression. Your consent and free will are the biggest obstacles for ensuring effective mind control. So long as a person is standing in their power and self-worth and ready to say no, that person cannot be controlled. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Manufactured consent is a concept based on the fact that consent or agreement for certain agendas is not always naturally or freely given, but rather must be constructed or engineered through various means of persuasion, manipulation, and information control. The goal is to shape public perception and align it with the interests and agendas of those in power. The concept highlights the role of mass media in influencing public opinion. It argues that the media, which is mostly controlled by a small number of corporations, serve as a powerful tool to disseminate information, slant issues, and set the agenda for public discourse. Through selective reporting, biased framing, and the promotion of specific narratives, the media can shape public opinion and manipulate consent without overt coercion. Manufactured consent also emphasizes the role of propaganda and persuasion techniques employed by governments, political campaigns, and other influential entities. This may involve the use of advertising, public relations, false flags, and other forms of strategic communication to mold public perception and shape attitudes towards certain policies or actions. Domestication is a process by which animals are bred and raised under certain processes in order to create a population with particular traits, dispositions, and behavioral tendencies. This can easily be applied to humans, a process also known as social engineering. The process can be seen as a kind of socialization in which individuals are removed and cut off from their natural environment. They are then taught, or rather conditioned, with the norms, values, and behaviors that are considered acceptable within their society or culture. This can take many forms, from parental discipline and education to religious or political indoctrination, media messaging, and peer pressure, as well as epigenetics and eugenics. It is not to say that humans are simply animals or are no different from animals. But as we learned earlier, trauma shuts down the human parts of the brain and keeps the animalistic tiers of brain function in charge. This is why trauma is an essential ingredient to the sinister recipe of mind control. When kept suppressed and cut off from the higher intelligence, the primal, programmable parts of the mind become active, open, and receptive to manipulation and domestication. The goal of domestication is to produce a population that is well adapted to its artificial environment and able to function within the social structures and expectations of its society or culture. In short, the goal of domestication is to socially engineer a perfected population of slaves. These dark occultists who shape society see the human population as their rightful property to manage, manipulate, and engineer as they see fit, like livestock. We are living on one big, free-range human farm. The basic steps of domestication involve a process by which animals or humans are conditioned to become more compliant and adaptable to the needs and desires of their owners. Domestication typically involves several stages: selection, controlled breeding, socialization, institutionalization, reproduction, and distribution. Ultimately, domestication is a process by which humans are bred, trained, and conditioned to conform to their owners' expectations and needs in order to serve and power the control system. Its subjects become highly codependent on their owners, relying on them for their basic needs and instruction on every aspect of their behavior. Consequently, the result is a state of learned helplessness, complacency, and a complete disempowerment and subjugation. So now we come to the ultimate concept by which this presentation is titled, Trivium Hacking. So hacking is the act of covertly accessing a computer program or network without authorization or in a way that was not intended by the system's owner in order to gain control over that system or to alter or manipulate them for their own purposes. The trivium, and when I say this from here out, I'm referring to all three, the trivium, the triad, and the trinity. They are all one system, right? I'm just calling the whole system the trivium to refer to that. The trivium is the threefold path to bringing about new outcomes into the unified reality field. Every single individual is using this process at all times, whether or not they are aware of it. To hack this process is to hijack their creative ability and therefore control that person and the power of their manifestation. This is trivium hacking. So how does it work? The function of trivium hacking is to, 1, attack you at the mental, emotional, and behavioral level, and 2, erode and install a toxic proxy for your true knowledge, care, and courage, and your will. So, informational mind control is an attack on the neocortex, both hemispheres, and this is attacking your thoughts. Emotional mind control is an attack on the mammalian and the right brain through your emotions. And behavioral mind control is attack on the R complex, left brain, and actions. And remember that dissociation, as we discussed earlier, is a psychological experience where an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors have become disconnected from each other. Their integrity has been shattered. right? This is the purpose. If they can control and manipulate the available information, your understanding will be flawed, and subsequently, so will your choices. They can control the beliefs you hold about yourself and the world. They can also select and curate the information you are exposed to, which will cause you to predictably form a certain opinion or emotional reaction, and then take specific actions which happen to align with the goals of the perpetrators. And the more trauma and fear-inducing the information, the better. So again, big scary virus killing millions, state of emergency, pandemic, lockdowns and vax. 9/11 attacks, big traumatic event there. War of terror, Muslims bad, and you're cheering for TSA and the invasion of Iraq. So an entry point can be found at all levels of the trivium: mental, emotional, behavioral, and reality itself. So at the mental level, they control you by controlling your perception, the available information and knowledge, and discouraging self-awareness and encouraging complacency. The mediums by which they do this are propaganda, indoctrination, academia, misinformation, toxic philosophy that they propagate, and of course, gaslighting. And the resulting mental states are ignorance, illusion, denial, solipsism, relativism, and egotism. So again, always dialectics. If they can't do one, they'll push you into the other. That's the controlled opposition aspect as well. It's all one big mechanism. So if they can't get you into ignorance, they'll get you into false or negative knowledge that you think is correct, that you're informed on, and actually you're completely incorrect. So if they can't get you in both states, they'll get you into one or the other. Another would be either proud ignorance or dogmatism. So either you're proud of not knowing anything. I don't care, couldn't care less, right? People tell you this all the time. Or dogmatism. They think they know and nothing you say can ever convince them otherwise. They are dug in on that. This mental level trivium hacking includes information which you believe or ignore about yourself and the world to protect your ego and your illusions. There's the egotism and the identity aspect of mind control. So to look at the internal and external aspect, you have the false identity, which is internal and objective, meaning you are objectively falsely identified with things internally. Ego distortion is the subjective. In other words, it's your perception of your true self is distorted internally. Then the false worldview is the external objective state. You are objectively wrong about the world and the way it operates, and you have a distorted perception of it. That is the subjective external aspect. At the emotional level of trivium hacking, they use your cognitive dissonance, emotional immaturity, psychological wounds, and pain points to manipulate you, using the mediums of propaganda, conditioning, controversy or divisive issues, demographics, polarization dialectics, abuse, and gaslighting. These are things that stir you up emotionally, and then they can not only harvest that energy, they can use it to control how you react to things. The resulting emotional states would be apathy, lack of care, fanaticism or radicalism, reactivity, instability, and chronic negative emotions, the depression, anxiety that pretty much everyone struggles with nowadays. So basically, they want you either disassociated and detached from reality and your part in it, right? Don't care, whatever. How many people are stuck in that mindset? Or an irrational zealot, right? just emotionally fervent towards your cause, your belief, your ideology, whatever. So the dialectics there would be apathy or fanaticism. That's the emotional states of I don't care or I care so much, it's insane. Or dissociation or hypersensitivity. In other words, dissociated and numb like a machine, or hypersensitive, as in everything triggers you. You're just a snowflake that just goes around and freaks out on people. And again, via the trivium, these emotional reactions are based on beliefs about yourself and the world, trauma. So even the trivium hacking is also compounding. It builds upon the prior levels. And the more unhealed trauma, the more miscalibrated and volatile the emotions will be. This is what I call drama-based mind control. At the behavioral level, they destroy or hijack your willpower, courage, and self-efficacy to break you mentally and control your actions. They do this by the mediums of conditioning, programming, social engineering, coercion and laws, and always gaslighting. And the resulting behavioral states are laziness, cowardice, and powerlessness. So they'll make you either lazy to not take action. If they can't do that, they'll make you obsessive. They'll push you into cowardice or martyrdom, like that's the hill that you will die on, right? You'll die on that hill as a martyr to the death. And either a state of powerlessness, thinking, oh, I can't create change through my actions. Oh, I can't make any kind of impact. I'm just a nobody. Or a God complex would be the other end of that spectrum, where they have this overly inflated view of themselves. So your action-based processes at this level are hacked to either make you an insignificant, harmless slave who doesn't care enough to take action, or too cowardly and afraid to take action, and essentially believing you have no ability to make any change, so why bother? Or usurp and exploit those aspects towards the controlling class own goals. So if you're not a coward, we'll put you in the police and military so that you can use your bravery for our means, right? Your obsession will put towards the rat race, hustle and grind, right? The slave system, the hamster wheel. And your powerlessness, well, maybe I'll just go run for office, then I can really make a change. You know, they hijack those aspects. If they can't destroy it, they'll hijack it. And finally, at the reality level, they manipulate, obfuscate, and mask true reality using illusion and coercion. The mediums they use are such as staged events, public theatrics or drama, controlled opposition, law and artificial consequentialism, culture, and disconnection from nature. Reality itself is highly manipulated and controlled. The spectrum of choices is limited, and the matrix disconnects the population from true freedom and nature. This is part of the domestication agenda, right? People are so cut off and afraid of nature because they're dependent on the system. They lose sight of true nature and how reality operates. Why would I want to go outside my cage when I've got everything I need right here, right? Protection, food, shelter, entertainment. So that is trivium hacking. That's how it works. It builds upon each level, just like the trivium. And they either stifle or hijack that layer, that aspect, to use towards their own agendas. So let's look at this from the trivium perspective, starting with the Trinity. You have Your thoughts are now corrupted. They're compromised. You're indoctrinated. Your head is full of propaganda. Therefore, your emotions are miscalibrated based on these incorrect thought, this incorrect thinking. And therefore, your actions are out of alignment with truth, out of alignment with moral law. Therefore, your integrity is compromised as well. It all starts from that mental level, and each subsequent layer is then compromised all the way up to your integrity. So this means not only are your thoughts, emotions, and actions out of alignment for a plethora of reasons. Maybe you know the right thing to do, but you're too much of a coward to do it. Maybe you feel one way, but your beliefs, your dogmatic way of seeing things is in conflict, and therefore your emotions and then your actions are confused. You don't know what to do, or you do something irrational. There's all different ways this can go awry when your thoughts, emotions, and actions are all out of alignment. Therefore, you are out of integrity. And this actually will perpetuate the cycle of abuse with yourself via this loop right here, because your integrity is out of alignment, which means you lose respect for yourself. And that then feeds into how you think about yourself, how you feel about yourself, and how you act towards yourself and externally as well. So you see, this system can either work for you or it can work against you. It's all about your state of mind, your alignment, your integrity. This is, again, the internal correspondence and the subjective internal aspect of the trivium. So then we have the holistic correspondence, which means it's dealing with both the internal and external effects, because it's your internal state then being manifested in reality. So your knowledge is corrupted, you're under mind control, you're full of indoctrination and propaganda, you have false beliefs about the world and about yourself, false perception of self and reality. Therefore, your understanding of yourself and reality are compromised. And therefore, your actions are compromised as well. Your wisdom, you have no wisdom, because this application of knowledge is only as good as your understanding and the knowledge itself. Therefore, the outcome will be garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. And when you're out of integrity, when you're out of alignment, especially with moral truth, the outcome will invariably be slavery, both enslaving yourself and participating in the aggregate condition of slavery, to also potentially even include enslaving others. So you have a police officer who has negative knowledge via statism, the belief in authority. So his understanding of moral truth and moral action are out of alignment. Therefore, his actions will be acting in alignment with his mind control program, his indoctrination, and enslaving other people by extorting them, kidnapping them, throwing them in cages, taxing them, fining them. I mean, the list is pretty extensive, but you get the point. The outcome is slavery, and he's enslaving himself. He's already enslaved to his false beliefs, to his mind control, and then he's enslaving others through his actions, and therefore enslaving himself through his own actions karmically. He's accruing karmic debt through his continued immoral actions. And that's just one example. This applies to anyone universally. And see, the interesting part here is this part, the outcome reforming by confirming or challenging the knowledge. Well, you can have confirmation bias. You can be gaslighted. There's all these other ways that this loop itself gets compromised, so that your own negative knowledge, your own negative karma is actually reinforcing that as well for a while. It's actually unsustainable, but it does work synergistically for a while. And that's where we're at. That's why the slavery system continues. It's like, oh, well, there's so much crime, and little do you know, government is creating more crime. So you think, oh, well, we just need more government and more government to fight all this crime, not seeing that they're actually increasing the problem. So that's how trivium hacking and mind control works at this trivium level. Bad information, bad choices or bad decision-making process, bad behavior, both from a pragmatic, bad, like stupid, gonna get yourself into trouble kind of way, and bad as in bad, evil, immoral, wrong. And therefore, there's your result. The universe is the perfect cosmic mirror for your ignorance. And that's how it works. So to summarize, dark occultists deploy perpetual and cumulative trauma and manipulation tactics to constantly assault and fracture the individual's self-identity construct and erode their ability to exercise a functional trivium process. These psychological wounds are then used as entry points for trauma bonding with an array of mind control programs, each tailored for any and all types of psychological profiles and psychoses. These individual algorithms degrade a person's self-worth and propagate an addictive cycle of abuse and predictable and malleable behavioral output. They also utilize a constant barrage of propaganda and misinformation, as well as the obscuration of pertinent knowledge to obfuscate the individual's discernment and navigation capacity to operate intelligently in the world. This cohesive process allows a comprehensive control matrix to overlay and usurp the individual's free will behavior and therefore shape what is collectively co-created as the human condition of slavery in service to the ruling class. So this is the story of mind control in the slave system. People are born into an invisible prison controlled by psychopathic ruling class. They are introduced to a hostile and abusive world and raised by parents caught in the same cycle. They are traumatized and indoctrinated at every angle. Throughout childhood and schooling and beyond, their true selves are shamed, violated, and eventually become buried. They are taught endless lies, all corroborated by the imposing system. Their mind, their care, and their creativity becomes hijacked and co-opted. Their souls fractured. They frantically assimilate the plethora of false identity constructs designed to serve the slave system. They are relentlessly bombarded with every mind control tactic in the book as it molds them into the perfect specimen for control. It is an ongoing process that continues throughout their lives. Once they reach adulthood, they go out into the world and try to find their place and purpose, never realizing that nearly every choice is already pre-designed to serve the matrix at their expense. They become police, doctors, laborers, engineers, soldiers, preachers, factory workers, and cubicle occupants, bankers, politicians and teachers, bureaucrats and desk clerks, all generally wanting to do some good, make a difference. Unwitting cogs in the system of institutions that perpetuate tax and wage slavery, violence and subjugation, consumerism, indoctrination, physical, biological, chemical, and spiritual warfare, and endless scams. Their caged inner voice crying out in agony and despair as they distract themselves with mindless entertainment, celebrity obsession, self-destruction and degradation, senseless drama, lamenting skewed and fruitless issues, never facing the true reality of their enthrallment. They entrench themselves in empty identities and causes that soothe their gnawing dissent and makes them easy to manipulate, predict, and control. They give everything, feeding every ounce of their energy, creativity, vitality, and freedom to the machine, and then they die, a spent husk of a human being, but not before spawning offspring to pass on their legacy of servitude. A bleak and harrowing tale of existence, but it doesn't have to be this way. So how do we free ourselves from mind control? What can we do to break it? Is it hopeless? Are we too far gone? While it is true that humanity exists in the current condition of deep mind control and slavery, this state is not permanent but conditional. Just as mind control and slavery have conditions that must be met to be manifested, so does freedom. And it is entirely in the realm of possibility, so long as those requirements are met. Again, nothing overrides the existence of choice, no matter how distorted, suppressed, and obfuscated it may seem. The only reason that such a parasitic and toxic system can exist and thrive as it does is that it is supported collectively by a majority of individuals in a traumatized and disempowered mindset. They are self-loathing and demoralized and fully willing to delegate their own sovereignty and personal responsibility away to a ruling class. It exists because they believe it must, and they insist that it is necessary. The current external condition of humanity as a whole is a correspondence of the internal, mental, emotional, and behavioral state of all individuals in the aggregate. There are two primary components which are essential to breaking all forms of mind control: knowledge of fundamental truths and healing from trauma. That is, to take control of your thoughts and your emotions, and therefore your actions. Knowledge and healing are the internal correspondences of the external cosmic forces of truth and love. Doing this will restore the inverted dynamics of trivium hacking and create a condition of harmony and symbiosis on the planet, but only if we choose it. Doing this will allow us to reclaim our minds from these evil beings. Mind control is inevitable. If you don't control your own mind, someone else will. So truth and healing work synergistically, in tandem. Think of them like 2 feet, both required for taking steps forward. They must happen simultaneously for real change to occur. Truth is required in order to heal because trauma creates distortions and illusions which prop up the false narrative and keep it going. So truth will shatter those illusions and allow true healing to take place. Healing is required in order to recognize and accept truth, because trauma will distort perceptions, trigger strong negative emotions, and ultimately cause a person to reject truth. Healing will balance the emotions, open the mind and heart to allow truth to be received. So you can only take in and reconcile with truth from your level of healing, and you can only heal based on your level of understanding and acceptance of truth. They fuel and enable one another cooperatively, like the alternating pistons of a motor. Truth brings recalibration and integration, and healing brings awareness and revelation. Without truth, healing cannot occur. Without healing, truth cannot be accepted. Truth is healing, and healing is truth. Truth is required as an essential aspect of reclaiming your mind, body, and soul. But what truth? There are many truths or perspectives, yet only one truth. So what is this truth that will break the spell and free mankind? Truth is simply that which is. Truth itself is not perception, but that which exists independently of it. Truth is what has occurred, what is occurring, and what will occur via the trajectory of variables, events, choices, and dynamics. Past, present, and future. It is all facts and deterministic dynamics of potentiality and probability. The universe and its nature. It is reality itself and the laws that govern it. So we must release what is not true and take in what is true. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. First, we must be willing to release our attachment to false beliefs and axioms, the lies which have been sold to us. Open ourselves up to the possibility of change and growth, and let go of what is based in illusion and not of truth. Then accept the reality too painful to acknowledge, which our minds have attempted to protect us from. Being honest with ourselves about the condition of our enslavement, of the traumas and horrors we have been victimized with, the truth of our subsequent wounding, and most of all, that those traumas and wounds, nor the false constructs we've identified with, do not define us. We must also become critical consumers of information, seek diverse perspectives, and engage in independent thinking to avoid being unduly influenced by dogmatic belief, psyops, and manufactured consent. It is not the truth that hurts, but the destruction of your illusions. Another way to encapsulate truth in a more tangible and practical capacity is understanding occult knowledge. This means the knowledge of oneself and the universe, the inner and outer worlds at the fundamental level. This means to know thyself, to deeply understand your own psychology, both as a human being and yourself specifically as an individual. Your strengths and weaknesses, your wounds and traumas, your shadow, your gifts, your power, potential, and your divine purpose. And coming to know this world and the way it operates via the natural laws, a deep integration of this knowledge, getting your mindset right, calibrating your boundaries, balancing your perspectives beyond dialectic traps, and most importantly, to come to know, understand, and understand the truth about your own inherent autonomy, sovereignty, power, and personal responsibility, and of objective moral law governing right from wrong behavior, the non-aggression and the self-defense principles. This is the crux of the dynamic between freedom and slavery via the law of freedom. The law of freedom is, as knowledge increases, morality increases, and therefore freedom increases, creating a state of liberty. As knowledge decreases, morality decreases, and therefore freedom decreases, creating a condition of slavery. This law is self-evident and has never been more apparent than it is now. We are in mass ignorance, moral degradation, and abject slavery, but it's reversible. Thomas Paine said, "The mind once enlightened cannot again become dark." There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Truth may bring great upheaval, discomfort, and destruction, but this is the fires of awareness laying waste to the illusions held, and once integrated, brings understanding, acceptance, balance, and peace to the mind. To heal is to touch with love that which we previously touched with fear. Healing comes from the Germanic word heil, which means whole, heal, heil. Trauma fractures our psyche and ego. We must heal to become reintegrated with all parts of ourselves, our ego, our thoughts, emotions, and actions. This is the true meaning of integrity, to be integrated. Trauma is an inescapable part of the human experience. We will all experience traumas in life, and my intention with this presentation is not to imply that trauma is inherently bad. However, there is a difference between a natural traumatic event or experience and causing intentional and methodical harm and abuse to a person. Trauma is an essential part of the evolutionary process as an extension of natural law or karmic law. It is fuel for the expansion of consciousness. It acts as the prima materia of which the alchemist transmutes the darkness into higher awareness and power. The goal is not to avoid trauma at all costs, but to empower yourself by learning to harness and leverage it to elevate your spirit to new levels. We are given a choice at all times between two cycles regarding what to do with trauma. One, a cycle of trauma and abuse, victims and abusers. This is the subconscious and unconscious. Or a cycle of trauma and healing, to know yourself and others more deeply. Healing from trauma and making the unconscious conscious is the only way to break the chains of mind control. When you heal your perspective, that is the external projection of your internal state, you are no longer susceptible to mind control programs which are rooted in a toxic view of yourself and the world. Once true healing takes place, you will begin to reject the false constructs and toxic behaviors and worldviews thrust upon us from every angle, and can begin to genuinely connect with yourself, others, and the universe. Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives. Healing, too, can be extremely uncomfortable and painful at first, but this is necessary, like extracting a searing hot bullet from your flesh or pouring peroxide on a festering wound. This pain is the infection of trauma being purged, cleansed, and purified, and only then can the true healing begin. I could do an entire presentation just on healing. That's beyond the scope of this presentation, but I encourage you to really look into it. The art of healing comes from nature, not from the physician. Therefore, the physician must start from nature with an open mind. There are many healing modalities to choose from, and the most effective path will be very personal to you in some combination of one or many of these. Working on your nervous system and releasing trauma. This can be yoga, breath work, tapping, emotional freedom. There are so many modalities. Just look into it, find something that works for you. Restoring your sexual energy or gender polarity. This is a huge one. I'm going to be doing a presentation on this for sure, of the absolute devastation caused by this gender war going on between the sexes and even internally, people through the trans movement and all this kind of stuff. Deep introspection and shadow work, personal accountability, learning healthy mindsets and coping tools to navigate difficult emotions. And as a pagan animist, I utilize the practice of shamanic ritual to bring unresolved trauma and programming to the surface for examination, processing, and release. and spending as much time in nature as also vital to my mental and spiritual health. Healing is about restoring the balance within oneself, not about fixing what's broken. So, by synthesizing and integrating truth and healing, the masculine and feminine components of evolution, your self-worth and self-respect will be restored. You will no longer accept or tolerate abuse from others or desire to engage in self-destructive behaviors. You will begin to love yourself and others and see yourself and the world for what it truly is, beneath all the layers of programming, trauma, distortions, and perversion, a magical playground for consciousness to learn about itself and grow and have beautiful, soul-expanding experiences. By remembering ourselves and becoming an integrated and aligned being, we regain access to our own creative power. By employing holistic intelligence, we can take back control of our trivium and use it to create a different world for ourselves, one of freedom, harmony, and flourishment for all. Only by reclaiming our trivium of consciousness can we break free of mind control and end the perpetual slave system. This can only be achieved by aligning our thoughts, emotions, and actions with objective truth, love, and morality. Through knowledge of self, natural law, and mind control, identifying and eliminating dogma and toxic beliefs, and through true education, mental discernment, scientific testing, direct experience, and connection with nature. By healing, integration, spiritual activation, heart-based intelligence, observing reactivity, emotional discernment, and having healthy coping mechanisms, and achieving emotional restoration and mastery. And through sovereign and moral action, through personal empowerment, civil disobedience, collective non-compliance, pivoting towards systemic independence, healthy behaviors, and authentic individual expression and creativity. Fear is the ultimate gatekeeper for the system, the ultimate cage for your mind. It does far more to enslave you than even the Matrix itself. It allows you to enslave yourself. It keeps you from healing, from facing the truth, and most of all, from discovering and becoming who you truly are and actualizing your fullest potential. The solution to the victim mindset is the warrior mindset. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. To adopt the mindset of the spiritual warrior is to realize and embody your autonomy and personal responsibility. You refuse to succumb to fear, to let it rule you. You go charging into the darkness of inauthenticity and extract the fragments of gold back into conscious awareness. You refuse to be a victim, even if you've been victimized. You refuse to be a slave, even if you have been enslaved. You refuse to let pain or trauma break your inner knowing of your immutable sovereignty and infinite worth. You stand firmly in your own power and truth. A person with this mindset can never truly be a slave. And this is the mentality that the ruling class fear more than anything else. Become the master of your own mind and let no one take it from you. True personal sovereignty is the ability to choose your own thoughts and emotions regardless of external circumstances. The only true solution. Knowledge of self and nature is the master key to unlocking a different reality and ending the slave system. It should be spread far and wide if we hold any hope to bring about real and lasting change. It all comes back to the prime spiritual principle of self-ownership, to reclaim your mind, body, and soul, and be truly responsible for your thoughts, emotions, and actions. To reclaim your trivium and live as the free, powerful, sovereign, and divine being you are meant to be. Freedom is not something that anybody can be given. Freedom is something people take, and people are as free as they want to be. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation and that it serves as a tool to break the program and help actualize your higher self and the possibility of a freer world. If you found it valuable, please share this with your friends and family. Again, if you want to dive much deeper into this topic, then please go check out the extended version on my channel and explore the many other videos I have available on the Wizard Factory. Thank you.